Kristina
Hello,
from the
Suzy.
heart of the park. I'm Suzy Vance, and I'm here talking about the first artist that is going to have a show at the Depot in Beverly Shores. The show will be opening on June 11th from 5 to 7, and we sure hope you will join us. But in the meantime, we'd like to have you get to know Kristina a little bit. So, Kristina, tell us a few things about you, and then I'll ask you some questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Suzy, for the introduction. I'm so glad to have some work up on display finally for a while. It's been a long time. And I'm excited to be at the Depot specifically. I'm a watercolorist living here in the dunes. I do primarily birds and specifically native birds. And this particular show, I'm doing native birds to Beverly Shores. But I do
the Great Marsh, right?
It's the Great Marsh. And I've worked a lot with like Indiana Audubon, some local birding groups here in Indiana and Chicago. So I do illustration work. I also do fine art, and but my subject matter is primarily birds. So ask me questions about birds. I can get you a good answer.
How did you get into birds?
That's a good question. I'll get that question a lot. The answer is kind of vague, but I was studying for my last year in school at the American Academy of Art. And I had my mom ask me to come with her on a birding club meeting for the first time. She wanted a buddy. I didn't really think I wanted to go, so I went just to support my mom. And after the birding club meeting, I found out, I had this moment of realization where I had pet birds, I was feeding wild birds, I started becoming obsessive with birding, and I started painting birds in my last few years of school, and I'm like, I think I like birds. And it kind of just snowballed into becoming a birder, going out and getting involved with like birding festivals, and almost exclusively working with birds. So it's something that I've always been interested in, but I really got into it my last year of college, which was back in 2012.
It's so interesting to me how things that we do over a course of our lifetime, there's a point at which it sort of finally gets its fingers into us and takes hold and says, will you do this with me?
Yeah. That's a very good description. It just like clicked.
Yeah.
And it was effortless after that. But it just took a while. It took a while for me to get there.
And how did you ever get into painting?
Oh, I've always been an artist. I feel like that's just something I've always done since I was very little. Always drew, always had a sketchbook with me. I doodled a lot. I don't even like the word doodling, but I sketched a lot. I always wanted to get into art, and I didn't know right away I wanted to go to school for art, but I knew I wanted to, if I could, I wanted to incorporate that into my future career. And it just so happened it worked out perfectly that I got a scholarship to go to the American Academy of Art in Chicago, and I took advantage of it, and I went and learned. I was originally going for illustration, and I fell in love with watercolor and changed majors halfway through to fine art. But I actually didn't start painting until I was in high school. I hated it. I hated watercolor when I first started it, and it's funny because I ended up majoring in it about 6 years later. But painting was not natural to me, but drawing was always. So I really took me a while to get my feet wet with painting, but I always loved drawing. I still love drawing and sketching. So that's my first and foremost passion with art is sketching.
Well, we are so excited to see your watercolors of the birds of the Great Marsh. That's going to be fabulous. Okay, shall we talk about a few of them?
Sure, let's do it.
This is one of them. That's a good one. That's the warbler, right?
That's a hooded warbler. It's a migrating species here in the dunes. Oh, there he is. Right there. Okay. It's a fairly small piece. It's probably like maybe 6 by 5 or 7 by 5. It's a fairly small piece. Might be a little bigger. 8 by 6. Let's call it 8 by 6. Okay. And it's a watercolor on paper. And that was that's a species that we don't get all the time here in the dunes, and specifically in the Great Marsh is probably not its most primary habitat, but we do get a lot of warblers, especially this time of year. in the
Is this one of
spring.
the ones that comes through and then comes back in the fall?
Yep, pretty much. They're just passing through. I think there's been a recorded nesting site nearby, although I don't have good evidence of that. But they're usually just coming through in the spring and then coming through in the fall with their fall plumage. But this is a breeding plumage of a male species, hooded warbler. The female just has a very faint hood. They don't have that little black kind of little shape around its head. You know, a very generic looking warbler other than that really, really prominent hood. And they're pretty hard to see. Birds in general are hard to see, but warblers especially can be tricky. I got a decent shot of this guy, and so I had to take advantage of by painting it. It's always hard to get reference photos of these guys without, you have to kind of go out and find them yourself. And that's part of the challenge and process of working with anything that's living and breathing. You want to make sure you're accurately portraying that living thing. But yeah, so I do go out a lot in the field and actually go birding, looking for birds, photographing them, and then taking that back to sketch and draw and paint. But this guy, he's just got a fun bird. It's a great dunes bird here in Indiana. But you don't get to see them all year round, which is a little bit of a shame, but that makes them more special too.
Well, he's quite handsome.
I think so too.
Okay, tell me about this guy.
All right, so that's our red-headed woodpecker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a very, very dune-specific bird. Anywhere in the marsh area, you'll see them. They're really very common here. And what's really interesting is that they're very uncommon everywhere else in the dunes, not in the dunes, but in Indiana, in Illinois. But here it's so easy to see them, and they're such a treat. The males and the females look the same, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll call this ambiguous in terms of its gender. But
interesting. I didn't know that they were the same.
Yeah, that's one of the few species that of woodpeckers that actually, when they're adults, they're hard to tell the difference between the male and the female. The juveniles won't have that bright red, and so I think they get mistaken for the females. But yeah, the males and the females do look the same. Normally, with woodpeckers, the more red, the more male, but in this situation, they're not. But they're just so striking. They're just red, black, white. You can usually catch a flash of their wings as they're flying through the marsh. Really, really easy to spot once you get them flying. But they're great woodpeckers. They're just very marshy birds, and they are here year round, which is great to see in winter. And I think of them, and I think of the marsh. They're always hanging out, kind of being they got that little raspy call that's not exactly very pretty, but it's a very woodpecker sound. And I love woodpeckers. They're one of my favorite subspecies of birds, but yeah, they're our family of birds. I'm sorry.
This is great.
Thank you. And a lot of my work tends to be pretty illustrational, so I don't really try to mess too much with background, but it tends to be pretty minimalist with like the branching and the leaves and the.
You want to see the bird.
The focus is really on the bird, but I try to at least give it some. You got to put something on there, so he's not.
Exactly.
But yeah, most people are familiar with herons.
He's something.
They're always so striking, and you get to see them all the time. Usually, spring, summer, fall. You get to see a lot of them in any water area with breeding bird. But the males have really beautiful breeding plumage in the fall or in the spring, excuse me. And I love them because they have such snake-like heads, and they just kind of stab the water with their beaks to try to catch fish, and they're pretty aggressive predators. I would not want to be a fish in the water with that bird, but they're really big birds, and they do get confused a lot with cranes. We get a lot of sandhill cranes, which I'm working on some of those as well. But this is almost like a study on the features of a great blue heron.
Yeah, I love your description of his snake-like head. Yeah. That's really true.
They're very reptilian, which draws me to birds. I love their reptilian-like features, but they're very unique. They're a very unique group of animals, and that's one most people are familiar with. One of the most common species in the U.S., which is the red-winged blackbird. And most people know them because they usually get dive bombed by the males if they're too close to the nest, and that is a male red-winged blackbird. The females are much, much, much different in color.
Uh-huh.
And they tend to be very brown. They look like a large sparrow. They get easily misidentified by beginning birders.
Mm-hmm.
But the males are very easy to see. They're usually on top of the reeds calling like this guy. They've got that like glunka-dee kind of call, which is a great sign of spring. That's kind of the first birds you'll see coming.
Right.
Early, even in late February, March, and that's
Right.
always a good sign to hear them. And they've been around for a couple months now, but they're nesting, they're calling. They're a very, very much a marsh bird.
Uh-huh.
And very easy to spot. So they put a lot of energy into their call, which is, I love that pose because it's just all their feathers are perked and their whole body's just trying to make that call and be as aggressive as possible with their call, but they look so cute at the same time.
They do. Okay. Well, that was spectacular. Now, I just want to thank you so much for being willing to share all your work with us. We're going to have a wonderful show, and I hope everybody out there has been curious about what Kristina is up to and will come see it on June 11th from 5 to 7 at the Depot, 525 Broadway in Beverly Shores. Thanks a lot, Kristina.
Thank you, Suzy. You're the best.